Okay, today I want to speak about an alternative way of doing fingerprinting for caching purpose, for long-lived caching for small websites. Yeah, the most used approach is there's always a bundler, and the bundler adds a hash to every JavaScript and CSS files and images and all that. That's how it's been the most accepted way of doing long-lived caching. And then add a cache control header, put a max age, like even put a immutable. This is like the most frequently used way, and probably this is the only way people know. Yeah, but I was experimenting with no build tools, and I was thinking, or no build way of building, like use source maps, use as much as possible, like instead of using JSX, use HTM, things like that. I was thinking like this bit still needs a bundler. So how do I get rid of a bundler? Yeah, for small websites, I'd like to remove the complexity. Yeah. So I figured out there's a way. Instead of having hash per file, what if you just hash the entire directory, entire static directory, and then the hash moves to the path, to the parent path, instead of having the hash in the file names. And then you can use express, like you can use a route slash public slash hash and point it to the public directory. If you do this way, um, that whole bundler is not required. There is an easy way to get a hash for the entire directory. Yeah, the way to get a hash would be with SHA-256 sum. Just use that. Uh, or if you don't want like a CI step, so using this would be like a CI step. If you want it to be like on boot, dynamically calculated, then you can use something called folder hash. In npm, there's something called folder hash here. Creates a checksum over a whole folder. So that's one way. There are some catches. You have to make all your imports relative. Otherwise, if you do root relative URLs, then that would break. That's my option A, or that's the most preferred way. I do any way, like most, like URLs and bundlers, everything understands uh, relative URLs. Yeah. So I'm already, my brain is already wired to use relative URLs. Yeah. But there's another way as well. You can have an import map to public slash, and you remap public slash to this. Like this is like a alias. Yeah. Public would be like an alias, and you make it point to the hashed URL, and then you can do it this way. So this also works, but I don't prefer this. I prefer this. Yeah. So with this, you can remove a bundler, and then you can stick to no build tools. For small websites, like this is more applicable for like websites with like 1-2 pages, few pages. There are some downsides. I'll come to that. Right before that, I'll jump. I skipped one piece. So in dev, right? In dev, I've been doing this approach for small websites. On dev, if you have the hash all the time, then if you have breakpoints in dev tools, and then like let's say you are in this middle of debugging something, yeah, you put a breakpoint on app.js, and you found a bug, and then you change app.js and you press save. The moment you press save, the hash would change. Yeah, and if the hash changes, the whole URL changes, and the browser thinks there's a whole new file, and so your dev tool breakpoints would disappear. Yeah, so you want a better DX, a developer experience. You don't want this. So on dev, I just put a constant, like a placeholder dash hash or something like this, so that um, so that like of course it fixes this problem here, DevTools breakpoints, but also just to remind me that this slash public slash app.js is not the correct path. Like if I have by mistakenly everywhere, like anywhere in the code, if I put /public/app.js, then um, then I wouldn't know that that bug exists. If there's no placeholder like this, then yeah, you could by mistakenly go directly to the public app.js, and then when you publish this to the production, you realize, okay, like I hard coded path wrongly. Yep. So to just remind me all the time that this place is a placeholder for the hash, I have this constant in here. Yeah. So that's a developer experience bit. Now, finally, what are the downsides of this? The one of the biggest downside of this is if you change anything in that entire directory, you change any file, or if you add a file or remove a file even in that whole public directory, the hash would change. And when the hash changes, uh, your cache, the cache control, which was your that was there, your CDN cache and browser cache, all that will bust, and it's like a whole new, like every file has to be recached. So yeah, one tiny change will cause your entire cache to be bust. Yeah, entire directory, all the files. So that's one downside. Um, no code splitting, tree shaking, minification. This I wrote it here, but it's actually like if you are already using it for a very small website, you probably don't care about the code splitting and tree shaking and all that. Yeah, but also no minification. You don't use a bundler, you don't have a minification step. Um, you could do with a bundler minification, but then what's the point, right? Like you don't want to complicate it. So not having minification will reduce the or increase the payload of your JS, CSS, etc. a little bit, like 10-15%, but your website is small anyway. This entire point is, yeah, probably you don't care about it. Yeah. And if your website is small and not changing that often, even this might not be a concern. This is something that you'll have to decide for your app. Yeah. I use it for like landing pages, for any static pages that don't change often. I won't use this approach for an app, for a dashboard app, or anything that keeps changing every day, like every week. Yeah. My blog post, for example, it has many pages, but I don't write new blog posts every day. Don't even write in every month. Yeah. So in that cases, I could use this approach. Yeah, I don't need to use whole bundler and or even that whole graph stuff. So another thing I want to tell about the hashing bit. So bundlers, the traditional bundlers, you already know, Webpack and Vite and ESBuild, blah blah blah. But even the tools that say that they're they're leaning on no build, like remember Ruby on Rails, DHH went and said on stage, this default experience of Ruby on Rails would be no build and blah blah blah. Yeah, but even there, if you looked at his demo, there's a bit to add this fingerprinting, so that piece is not skipped. So there is still a little bit of code somewhere that goes through the entire JavaScript graph, and even the CSS, like even I think it goes through the HTML and goes through this CSS as well, and then adds this suffix, adds the hash suffix. Yeah. So there's a little bit of bundler, but this approach is simpler for even smaller websites. Yeah. Everything that you do doesn't have to scale to millions of web pages or something. Yeah. So you could use this approach if your project fits into that constraint. Yeah, and it simplifies your uh, build process. Yeah. So that's all I have to say. Tell me if there is um, any any other pros and cons you find um, from this approach. Have you tried something like this? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.